right, welcome to the Krueger Show, everybody. Larry Krueger back with you. Hope everybody's having a phenomenal Friday. We're going to talk a little football today with a guy that I've been following on Twitter for a while. Former offensive lineman, now has his own YouTube show, and he's blowing up. And he's with us on the Krueger Show. Brad Graham. Brad, how are you?
Larry, I'm doing phenomenal. I'm especially doing a lot better after I've had some time to kind of dive into some of these prospects a little bit with the 49ers. I'm having a blast, man, and thank you for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, because you played offensive line at DVC and then played collegiately. Why don't we take it from there? Where are you born and raised? Are you a Bay Area kid?
I'm a Bay Area kid. I was a South Bay kid. Then, halfway kind of growing up, moved up to kind of the East Bay. And so I've been kind of floating around the Bay Area. Actually, just recently moved out to Discovery Bay. So it's
Nice.
actually a big change. I'm officially not in the Bay anymore. So it's a nice change, but it's been fun. And like you said, I played football a little bit. So I pull a lot of my experience from my time, especially playing offensive line. It's a position that's near and dear to my heart. I think you can even see right behind me, I got my Trent Williams jersey.
Yeah.
I'm just
Willis.
a big offensive line guy.
Nice. Well, hey, I consider Discovery Bay Area. I went to Sac State for college, and I felt like it was, in a way, I almost felt like Sacramento seemed like the Bay Area to me.
It's definitely like an extension of the Bay.
Totally.
Sure.
I mean, you know, if you go into downtown Sacramento, and you're at a sports bar, those are Giants fans and Niner fans, and believe it or not, even Warrior fans, because the Kings didn't even show up until I was a freshman in college in the late '80s, early '90s. So yeah, Sacramento is, my brother's up there. He's a judge up there. My wife's family's up there, and it's as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of Bay Area extended. But tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel, because man, you got like 30,000 plus subscribers. We just been doing this for a month, and we've got close to 4,000, and we're happy with our growth. But when I looked over at you, I'm like, wow, man, this guy's got some serious momentum. Tell us a little bit how you started it, and what if you have kind of like a theme or a mindset or a kind of an overarching kind of guiding principle of your channel. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I started out on Instagram. It really just started out as a page, kind of a side hobby. I had my own career going in the event industry. And that was taken off. So, but I've always been a football guy at heart. So I needed an outlet. I needed something. I was commenting on blog posts and things like that. But at a certain point, I was like, all right, I feel like I know a little bit more than what I'm reading in some specific cases. And I was like, I just need my own platform. So it actually started out on Instagram, and then we've just, I've just grown it to, Facebook, Twitter, and then YouTube. And so we're making our way across all the platforms, but really dived into YouTube last off season. So pre-draft stuff, we did a lot of pre-draft stuff with Jordan Elliott of Niners Nation.
Another guy who I follow on Twitter who's really sharp.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And he really knows his stuff. But that's really where I kind of got started on YouTube. And then as it, went into training camp, we started ramping up. It's been definitely a process trying to figure out the lane, like where I fit in, what type of content I'm doing. Right. I do a lot of daily lives, but I also I share a lot of content to kind of be kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of 49er fans, to be able to not only hear my opinions and perspective, but hear what else is going on, and being able to show visually what else is going on around the world of the 49ers.
It's awesome, man. It's awesome. And I'm sure Niner fans appreciate it. I'm sure those numbers, are just a reflection of that, man. And I started kind of noticing you on Twitter through some of the commentary that you were putting out there. And I thought, man, this doesn't sound like a beat writer to me. It's like I started reading more of it, and I'm like, you know what? This guy's got a football background. And then I just kind of had a note to myself, hey man, I gotta get Brad on the show. We gotta figure out a way to get him on the regular, because dude, I just some of your stuff is really good. One of the things that caught my eye today that you were tweeting out is a thought that I had in the last 48 hours, as I've been doing deep dives, on all of these undrafted free agents. And, I think the Niners had a stellar draft. Now, people say, well, why do you think they had a stellar draft? Do you love Drake Jackson? Immediately it's like, you must love Drake Jackson. It's like, well, it's not that I don't love Drake Jackson. It's that the 49ers, in my estimation, got two totally different draft classes here. They've got the draft class, and then they've got the undrafted free agent class. And I went through every team in the league, and I would say that the 49ers quality and volume of their undrafted players is giving them what I think is going to be maybe as many as 15 rookies this year. We'll see how it all shakes out. But I think a number of these guys have an opportunity to make the team, and maybe a couple of these guys maybe even start. Shh, don't say it. But let's talk. Why don't we start? Usually, most of these draft things, Brad, start with the first round pick, and then we work towards the undrafted. Because you're so good at this, I'm going to start with the undrafted, and we'll work our way forward. How about that?
Absolutely.
We'll do this.
I love that.
We'll do this opposite. I read a tweet this morning from you about Donovan West, and it really was like, wow, because it was like we were it's like we were sitting together watching the same film. I spent the last couple of days taking a look at these guys, and I looked at West, and what I see is a 310-pound, pretty athletic guy who likes likes contact, who seems fairly scheme versatile, seems athletic enough to play in a zone scheme. He seems powerful enough to play in a gap scheme. He's about 6'4". He's about, as I said, 300 to 310. And I see a player that could have been the Niners' fourth-round pick. And instead, he went undrafted. So give me your thoughts, because it sounds like from what I read, at least the brief comment, that you're not necessarily getting why he was an undrafted player.
I really don't get it. And I think the way you kind of broke it down is perfect. Donovan was actually a draft crush of mine. I'm big into the draft, so I love scouting, and I love scouting offensive linemen. And he was someone that I fell in love with early in the process because, again, you can see how he can run outside zone, inside zone. They pull him a lot. And that's one of the kind of galaxy brain ideas that I would love to see Kyle's scheme evolve a little bit. If you can implement a pulling center, I can see how Kyle could use that misdirection and get linebackers flowing in one direction, hit play action off that. So I've kind of been like thinking, and we know Alex Mack, he's long in the tooth, and he could be stepping away. So center has been something that I've been prioritizing in my studies, and Donovan was someone who I fell on early in the process. So watching him early in the process, and then I thought he was a really good prospect. I had him kind of in that third, fourth round range. And so again, now that he's on the 49ers and I'm doing the research with him on the 49ers, again, I watched USC versus Arizona State last night, and I did my study. And if you look at my notes, 2/3 of my notes, because I was going back and forth between Drake Jackson at a USC and Donovan West at center, 2/3 of my notes are about Donovan West and how well he was playing. Again, being able to get to the second level, the way they pull him, him getting guys on the ground. So I have a valid question. I'm waiting for someone to explain to me, like, why did he go undrafted? And now I've been talking about this too, leading up into the draft, because I had the pleasure of going to the combine and covering it. And when I saw Donovan amidst the rest of the offensive line crop, he does look a little smaller. You can kind of see where, okay, maybe there is a size concern. He does look more like a regular guy. I guess I would consider myself a regular guy at 6'3". I played around 285, 290. So I was an undersized offensive lineman. And so I could see that, where maybe someone would say he's a little bit undersized, because you also kind of transition to Zakel a little bit, and they talk about him being a center. That guy's 6'6", 315. I think that's more ideal size. So the only thing that I can really come back to with him is maybe it's a size concern, maybe it's an athletic traits concern. But when you pop on the tape, the guy's a football player, and he will definitely be able to transition to this scheme, at least from what I can see.
What I like is that, usually if you're thinking, okay, undrafted free agent lineman, there's either an injury, there's an attitude issue,
Right.
um, or there's athletic limitations. I didn't see the athletic limitations. I see a guy who's 6'4", 310 pounds, who can pick guys off in space on the move.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, that's when you can see an offensive lineman who's 310 pounds, and he looks like he could add to his frame. I mean, the shoulders are kind of small. He doesn't have a huge hulking frame, as you said. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't see a lot of bad weight. He's not a sloppy bodied guy. From the people the road scout that I know that rolled in and had ASU this year told me, hey, this guy's a tough guy. He likes to fight it out.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells me that that's to me the toughness factor always is like, okay, you don't really know until you actually know, and so that's why I always have to make phone calls on exactly how tough is this guy. Is he committed to the process of playing football? If he was the center, could he make the line calls? Did they ask him to make the line calls at ASU? Things that sometimes you don't always see necessarily on the film. But what I saw is an athletic guy who likes to hit people, who can pick people off in space. And then I'm looking at the Niners offensive line, and I'm seeing Daniel Brunskill, and I'm seeing maybe Colton McKivitz, and maybe one of these other rookies as center options. And I'm thinking, why can't Donovan West roll into camp and steal that job? He's actually got reps at that position. He's probably had the most reps of almost anybody that he's going to compete against this summer for that position. So I really like that one. I also kind of liked the other undrafted free agent offensive lineman, Sam Schlater, who played left tackle at the University of Minnesota. I'm a little partial to the Big Ten offensive linemen because I think some of the best offensive line coaches reside in the Big Ten. So I always take a second look at those Big Ten guys, and also the weightlifting program, the strength and conditioning people in the Big Ten. It just seems like the offensive linemen who come out of the Big Ten are NFL ready. But I don't see great movement skills from Schlater at left tackle, and I can see why people would say, well, he doesn't have great movement skills. He can't block speed rushers. Okay, that may mean that he's not a left tackle at the NFL level, but it doesn't mean that he can't play. And he was one of their better offensive linemen. And then Jason Poe is another super intriguing guy. We're talking about West doesn't look the part. Poe really doesn't look the part. He's 6'1", 300 pounds. But then all of a sudden you start looking on YouTube and all these videos, and you start thinking, wait a second, maybe this guy's a tight end. Maybe he's an H-back. Maybe he's a fullback. Heck, maybe he's a short yardage, dare to say it, running back. Maybe he's a center. I don't think he's a guard or a tackle, but maybe he is a center, and maybe he's a 10-year starter. I mean, this is another guy, enormously strong, really sawed off, 3-4 inches shorter than your typical offensive lineman, but he still has decent size as far as length of arms, and he loves to get after it. So let's talk a little bit about those two guys, Poe and Schlater. I don't know if you studied either one of them, but it seems like, especially with Jason Poe, a lot of people are kind of centering on him, Brad, as maybe one of the better undrafted free agent signings, regardless of team, across the league.
I've definitely started to zero in on Jason Poe, and I'm ashamed of myself, and I've said this, like, why didn't I watch him before the draft? Why did it take for him to be an undrafted free agent to be on the 49ers before I started watching him? Because I instantly fell in love with the player. When you see him get out on his track and get in space and start headhunting, it's a beautiful sight to watch because more often than not, he gets his guy on the ground. Because of his speed, he is able to get to his spot before the defensive tackles, defensive ends, linebackers are ready for it. Typically with offensive linemen, they're going to be more slower, I guess, less explosive athletes. But with him, it's the opposite. He's extremely explosive. And when he gets on his track, he often arrives faster than the defense is anticipating. So he's able to catch them off guard and he's able to rock them. And he's very physical. And like you mentioned, he's very strong. And when we look at the trenches, right, what do we always talk about with, O-line, D-line? It's, low man wins. It's a leverage game in there. he's already won that. He's 6'1".
Yeah, he's
And,
the
a
low
lot
man.
of people might look at that as a slight, but when I look at the center position, I feel like that is a specific spot where you can get away with being 6'1". Because if we look at opposite side archetypes with like guys like DJ Jones and even Davis that they brought in the 6th round, they're not huge guys. They're about 6'1", 6'2", 300, but they have great first step explosion. They have the strength behind it to maintain the leverage, and they do pretty well in that regard. So I do see a fit for him at center where he could actually be successful. But like you said, he could be a fullback. They could use him out in space. They can potentially have him in that kind of Jeff Wilson role. I don't know if you remember when they would motion Debo basically to the left or right of Jimmy, and then they would have Jeff Wilson kind of flanked, and then they would motion Jeff Wilson across essentially the formation as a lead blocker. Well, I just say, what if you put Jason Poe in that position and you have this guy already ahead of steam in motion, coming across basically the formation and just lighting up edges or safeties coming up, whatever. So he's someone that I came away like, he's fun to watch. And then like you said, you see him kind of working as a fullback. You kind of see him catching some balls. But one of the things that I took away was he has a great base. His feet are phenomenal. I'm a stickler with my offensive line evaluation. I came from a zone scheme and I thrived in that particular scheme. So if I were to be building an offensive line, I would want all my offensive linemen to be athletes. I would want them all to have first step quickness, be able to get out in space, get on their tracks, and do all that kind of stuff. So with the Donovan West, with Poe, and kind of the way you're seeing them, even the offensive linemen that they drafted, it feels like they're shifting kind of their archetype away from maybe the schools and Colton McKivitz and kind of going for the high upside athletes. Schluter, on the other hand, I haven't gotten into yet, so I won't pretend like I have. But again, good size, 6'6", 235, and they seemingly have a thought process of taking these tackles and kicking them inside on the interior. And there's going to be a lot of competition on that interior. We don't know if Aaron Banks is going to run away with the starting job left by Laken Tomlinson. We don't really know if, Jalen Moore has a spot potentially at guard or if they're going to keep him at tackle. So I love what the San Francisco 49ers were able to do with their undrafted free agent class, let alone what they did in the draft.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. You watch Poe, you can see the upper body strength. I mean, he literally, and he will lock out. And he's actually got longer arms than you would think on a 6'1", 300-pound frame. Mm-hmm. But man, when he locks out, man, he shows great strength. Like he could hold the point right there. Mm-hmm. And the one thing, I mean, Jerry Ball was 5'11". Michael Carter, who I think is maybe the greatest nose guard I've ever seen in my life, was not more than 6'1". I mean, so
look at Aaron Donald.
Aaron Donald is not tall. He's the greatest defensive lineman in the league today and maybe one of the greatest of all time. Poe looks like he could absolutely, he's got the strength where he could go up against the Javon Kinlaws of the league and, hold them up and not just be thrown away like so many centers do get thrown away by some of the big boys inside the true two-gap defensive tackles in the NFL. So I'm really eager to see Jason Poe this summer in camp. Let's talk about some of these other undrafted guys. First of all, without me leading you, outside of the guys we've already discussed, do you have a personal favorite? Do you have a personal favorite of their undrafted class?
Well, my personal favorite is Wes, because if the 49ers took him in the 3rd round, I would have been doing jumping jacks. I would have been running around my office, extremely excited as a 3rd round pick. So the fact that they got him as basically kind of like a priority undrafted free agent, they gave him a decent guaranteed contract, which makes me feel that he does have a shot at making this roster. And again, you mentioned there's going to be a potential hole there at center, and he seems to have the most experience of the group. Again, Daniel Brunskill, you could think, could slide into there. But I also like the Leon O'Neal pick, but I also like the Jeremiah Gemmel pick. I think
let's talk about him, the general.
Yeah, I think I love what D'Amico Ryans has been able to do in his tenure with the 49ers. We focused last year on what Miko was able to do as a play caller, being a first year DC, but as a person who can develop talent, you look at Fred, you look at Greenlaw, you look at Aziz, you look at DFF, you look at guys that aren't even on this roster. Jonas Griffith, who started, I think, every game for the Broncos last year after they traded him in training camp. They have done a phenomenal job of being able to identify undrafted or low range linebackers that are these tweener types and kind of having this like hybrid safety linebacker archetype. And Gemmel to me kind of fits that role. And I could see him being maybe one of these slower developing guys. He can kind of ride him on the practice squad and or be a special teams contributor. But I like the traits that he has. And I'm very interested to see how D'Amico kind of develops him.
That's a good one. He played at North Carolina, 6'1", 2 1/4, Jeremiah Gemmel. And he, if you look at his numbers, I mean, the numbers are impressive. He made a lot of tackles at UNC, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the Niners have, Fred Warner was a former safety. Greenlaw runs in the 4.5s. I mean, Aziz Al-Shaair flies. I mean, absolutely flies. And then Flanagan Foles, if you watched him at Arizona, he was a DB. Oren Burks moves well. The linebacker they just signed, who played at Oak State, played for Green Bay. Curtis Robinson is a terrific cerebral special teamer who played at Stanford. And now you add to that mix Jeremiah Gemmel, who, as I said, very productive player at North Carolina. Marcelino Mccrary Ball, who's another safety, jumbo safety, 6 feet 214. He's got tremendous wheels. I mean, if you watch him, you'd think, man, this guy's a running back. And Marcelino Mccrary Ball is an athlete. He's an undersized athlete who can fly around. And it's amazing how football evolves through time. When I was a kid, you had Ronnie and you had Chuck Cecil and you had Joey Browner, and you had some of these guys in the David Fulcher and Steve Atwater and these safeties that were thumpers,
right?
Guys who would literally separate you from the football. And then the next generation of those guys was like Deshaun Goldson and Dante Whitner. Well, even just since the Harbaugh years, the league has changed from that point to today, where now the thumper safety is no longer in vogue. It's really more everybody's got to play coverage. It's the NFL game on the defensive end. It's a rush and cover game, but now we're in a point where everybody who's up front's got to be able to rush, and everybody who's not on the front line has got to be able to cover.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like I love Javon Kinlaw, but and I love that kid for Georgia, the monster 370-pound guy. But the D tackle who doesn't pass rush is becoming less popular and less valuable. And the DB who's there to thump you and separate you from the football, that guy is suddenly, there's almost, he's coming trotting off the field in certain sub packages. So it's a rush and cover game. It's always been that, but now it's like, you better be a pass rusher or you better be able to cover, because otherwise you're kind of in football nowhere land.
Yeah.
And that's where the guy that I think is intriguing on this undrafted list is the San Diego State kid, Segun Alubi, who's 6'2", 220 pounds. And I watched Alubi last night. He runs 4.45. 4.45 at 220 pounds. And if you watch him fly around at 220, he doesn't look small. He hits with he starches guys. And he'll blow people up in the backfield. He's not at 220. I thought maybe he's going to be underpowered. Doesn't seem to be underpowered. He's got long arms. It doesn't seem like he's going to get engulfed, but 4.45 speed. I'm really eager to see what that looks like this summer.
Absolutely. And it's funny because those kind of thumpers that we know as, Deshaun Goldson, one of my all-time favorite 49ers, he'd probably be a linebacker in today's NFL. Like there's definitely a transition of getting these guys who have baseline cover skills, but if they can be physical in the run game, you better pencil yourself in as a linebacker in the NFL. And I really feel like, to your point, for me, my whole evaluation of the safety kind of hybrid linebacker changed with Derwin James. I loved Derwin James coming out of Florida State, but I was very weary of him because of how Florida State utilized him. They utilized him as an edge rusher. They utilized him as a linebacker. They utilized him all over the field. And I had the like old school, like, how's the NFL going to do that? They don't play the safety position like that. So I was weary of him. But when he goes to the Chargers, they use him exactly like that. He becomes an all-pro. And that actually helped me soften my evaluation to Fred Warner, because when Fred Warner was coming out, I think you kind of alluded to it. Was he a safety? Was he a nickel cornerback? Was he a rush, like an edge rusher? I think those were the positions people were thinking about even before a linebacker. So for me, thankfully for Derwin James, who kind of showed me the light on the way kind of the safety position was being played, it also allowed me to kind of soften, to Fred. And actually, Fred was one of my favorite prospects in that draft out of BYU, because I saw him as that weapon. Now it's just up to the team to put him in a spot and develop him from there. But again, guys like Segan, Gamel, and Mccrary, Ball, I feel like those types of guys, the 49ers have made it clear what type of archetype they want from that position. And they could be ultimately pretty darn successful. And also, too, like Talanoa Hufanga. I think Talanoa Hufanga is extremely cerebral player, and he puts himself in tons of positions to be successful. We know he might be lacking in the long speed, but that's why I'm interested. Where do they ultimately keep Talanoa? Do they keep him at safety? Do they have him in that hybrid kind of back and forth role? So it's going to be very interesting. And they also grabbed, Leon O'Neal, who could ultimately end up as a linebacker as well. So I like the way that the 49ers have kind of, it seems like they have a very specific thought process when it comes to these hybrid safety linebackers.
It's funny. Brash Cat in the chat says defenses are also dropping more linebackers in favor of a third safety on the field. We're seeing that more and more. Everybody's going to speed and more speed and more speed, and it's all about speed. When the Niners went to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs 3 years ago, I remember seeing a stat that they were the two fastest teams in the NFL. And to me, that's cause and effect, and that's not coincidental. I think speed wins in so many ways in the NFL. I mean, ultimately, this. And I've said this a few times, and people are probably tired of it, but offensive football is about creating space, and it's simple as that. And defensive football is about closing that space down. And if you can have greater speed at linebacker and in the secondary, because and ultimately what it really comes down to is an athlete breaking down in space and being able to bring somebody to the turf, in a solo situation out in space, outside the tackle box. That tells me what kind of athlete you are. Can you bring down another athlete?
Can you break down? Can you not over pursue?
Yeah,
Can you
not
find
lunge.
The angles?
Right.
All that good stuff.
Exactly. You mentioned Hufanga. Hufanga's interesting because the biggest play of his year was that deep ball down the middle. And, we all know that's his weakness. He's susceptible to the deep ball. And it was almost like Green Bay, had it on their list of things to do. And they just threw it in at the end because they hadn't done it yet. It was like, we got to challenge Hufanga deep. It's like note to
100%
self.
right, because they had an underneath wide receiver wide open that probably would have sealed the game for him. But they're like, we're going to go after Hufanga.
We're going up top because we decided on Wednesday.
We saw it on tape. We're going to do it. This is we're not going to back off. We're going to take our shot.
And yet he was there, stride for stride, perfect coverage, and it tells you a little bit about the kid's accountability. Now, if they went out 5 times, would he have stood up? I would say not, but who knows? I hate to doubt that kid because he is, in the truest sense of the word, a football player. All right, let's talk about Leon O'Neal for a second because I'm an A&M fan, and so I watch A&M every week. And O'Neal's got the prototypical safety size. He's a little on the stiff side, but he played in the SEC against the best athletes in the country, and he wasn't like he was a guy who was just picked on routinely. They'll do more of that in the NFL if they find out you can't cover. But what do you think of O'Neal? It's weird. It's like in some ways you look at him and you say, you know what? I see the stiffness, and then I see some of the lack of movement ability and some of the workout numbers, and then I'm like, okay, maybe he's not an NFL safety. And then you watch the film and you say, well, I'm not seeing the examples of his liability and coverage. I think he's a much more natural player. He's like a better natural football player with more natural instincts and movements than he is a workout guy. And I just think if the draft had been the day after the college football season, I think he gets drafted. The fact of the matter is, it's not for months, and after you crunch all the variables, suddenly you convince yourself Leon O'Neal can't play. I think he's going to make this team. Give me your thoughts on O'Neal. I don't know how much you studied him.
I'm still working through O'Neal, but I of course have baseline understanding, at least what I think he is. And I think you're exactly right. I think I've seen a guy who's been able to be successful in coverage. I've seen a guy who's been able to come down into the box and do work there as well. He seems, you've seen instances where he does miss a tackle here or there, but I've also seen instances where he does come up and make the tackle. So to me, that's more of a consistency thing. Obviously, you want to be the most consistent player you can be, but with more reps. And again, he seems like a cerebral enough guy to be able to get it figured out. And I think one of my favorite things about him is just his attitude. And I think that goes far for football players. Like, you have to be willing, you have to be active, and you have to want to be great. And I think he does. And it might sound cliche, but I feel that energy from him. So I think I was surprised that he went undrafted as well. But again, you look at the current safety room, the San Francisco 49ers did not officially draft a safety. And right now you basically have Jimmy Ward, George Odom, Tavarius Ward, and Talanoa Hufanga. Maybe there is a chance that he has a real chance to be able to get in there and get some snaps, if not on special teams alone. So again, back to our kind of original conversation of how we started this. San Francisco 49ers walked away with the undrafted free agent class where we're potentially talking about 3, 4, 5 guys that could make the roster, but we're talking about a ton of guys that could definitely make the practice squad and develop into roster guys.
What I love about the Baltimore Ravens drafting, and it started with Ozzie Newsome, it's continued on with Eric DaCosta, is that they don't try to find a football player off a workout. They go to the football players and draft them. They draft the best collegiate football players and take their chances with the measurables. And to me, that's far safer than going to all these workouts, falling in love with stopwatch speed and bench
where you get in
press
trouble.
numbers.
You fall in love with the workout hype. That's where you get in trouble.
Totally. I mean, because there's all kinds of guys who work out, and it's not the Olympics or some kind of. It's a game. It's a game of skill, and you got to have balance and quickness and toughness and desire and want to, and you got to love the process of football. You got to be a football player, and that sounds generic to people, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Two guys that I think are really interesting going into camp this summer that were great college football players, but when the draft came around, they didn't necessarily fit the measurables. Taylor Hawkins from San Diego State played the corner for the Aztecs. They had a really good defense. I mean, San Diego State's defense was top-notch this year. I watched the film of Hawkins. He's really cerebral. He's really around the football. I don't think he can play corner in the NFL. But he's 6'1", and he's 205 pounds. So he's actually a jumbo corner by corner standards, and he's a decent safety prospect. I think they may have found something there. I mean, Taylor Hawkins, to me, now there's a ton of guys who played corner that cannot transition to safety. And so what is the key? Some guys can play corner, some guys can play safety, some guys can transition. Merton Hanks transition from a good corner to an all-pro safety. It has happened before. I've heard people say Richard Sherman ought to do it, and there's something that tells me that Richard Sherman can't do that he can't play safety, but we'll see. But then the other guy is Quantrez Knight from UCLA, who wore 24 for the Bruins, and they had a pretty underrated defense. And I thought Quantrez was kind of the alpha in their secondary. And he's listed as a corner at 6 feet, 200 pounds. He's probably too slow to play the corner, especially outside. But man, he's so good and so physical and such a leader. Gets guys lined up. He's smart. He's cerebral. He's aggressive. He's a tone-setting type player. Those guys are valuable. I don't know what you think of those two guys, but I'm eager to see. Hawkins. Can he play safety? Quantrez. Can he be a special teamer? Can he be that fifth or sixth corner? Can he make the roster? I think both those guys were excellent college football players. We'll see if they can do it in the NFL.
I feel like we're starting to land on a theme here, Larry. The San Francisco 49ers brought in a lot of football players. We might not know exactly where they're going to play, but just like you mentioned, you see traits that can be played at multiple positions. Now it's obviously up to the San Francisco 49ers to decide where they fit best. But to your point, exactly right. I see both of those guys as being able to potentially fill in at the safety position. And even some of the draft picks that they were able to take, it does feel like that, and we've seen this from them before, that they will take guys and they will move them out of position if they feel it's a necessary fit for them. So when I look at this undrafted free agent class, especially the linebacker, cornerback, and safety crop, it does feel like a lot of those guys are very interchangeable, and it's going to be very interesting to see which one actually rises to the top and takes control, because there's going to be a lot of competition at camp, and I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about.
No doubt. All right, we got a donation here. Look at this, a sizable donation from Hell of This, Hell of That. He says, Larry, I'm one of your biggest fans. I appreciate all the coverage. Have a blessed day. Nice. Hell of This, Hell of That, Hell of Yes. Thanks for being part of this. I'm loving this YouTube thing. It's really a ton of fun, and
it's awesome, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and the people are awesome, and we're doing post game stuff. We're doing live streams. So it's been a ton of fun. All right, let's jump to a couple other guys in the undrafted list before we hit the actual draft. The two receivers that they got, Tay Martin and Taysir Mack, are both really intriguing to me. Almost identical body types. 6'2" for Mack, 6'3" for Martin. They called Tay Martin Big Play Tay. Taysir Mack was the deep threat at Pittsburgh for Kenny Pickett. Mack 6'2", 190. Martin 6'3", 185. Martin didn't want to lift because he doesn't have a strong upper body, so he didn't want to do the lifting and didn't do the lifting. So there may be strength issues there, but when you watch Tay Martin, I saw him at Wazoo. I thought he was good. Then I saw him at Oak State. I thought he was great. Then the more I saw him early in the year for Oak State, and I thought, wow, he looks good. Then late in the year, he was their best player. He was one of the, I thought, in the Notre Dame game where he caught 3 touchdowns, had over 109 yards receiving, or 109 yards, I think what it was, 8-9 catches. He was the best player on the field against Notre Dame. They do not beat Notre Dame in that bowl game without big play Tay Martin. And then Taysir Mack is interesting in that he's tough. He makes plays across the middle of the field, and he was their vertical threat. He was their downfield threat. If I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Niners cut Taysir Mack, I am scooping him up immediately, because obviously he's got a nice rapport with Kenny Pickett. I think both those guys, Brad, have a real good chance to make the roster at wide receiver. Obviously, there's Debo. We don't know about his future. Ayuk. There's Jennings. There's Danny Gray. There's Ray McLeod. So everybody else is competing for probably one spot. But I would say on paper, that competition is going to come down to Keyshawn Johnson, big play Tay Martin, and Taysir Mack. What do you think of the undrafted receivers? I think both those guys are, way better than your typical undrafted receiver.
Oh yeah, it's funny. Taysir, I don't know why, but the first time I got my eyes on him, I was like, you remind me of Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne was an undrafted free agent out of Eastern Washington. Now, it's not apples to apples, but I just got this vibe again, like this ability to be able to work over the middle, do all those types of things, make the hard catches. I think he can offer some of that. And then with Tay Martin, he's an explosive athlete. Like he can go up, he can make the catches. You can see, I
He
feel
high
like
points
there's
it.
this toughness. Yeah, high pointing, really good at high pointing. I feel like there's this toughness in both of them that again is also becoming an archetype type mentality for the way they scout wide receiver prospects, because we've seen the opposite. We've seen, the Dante Pettises, and although phenomenal athlete and pretty solid at separating, just unconventional, but maybe didn't have that dog mentality. But I think some of the things that we've seen with Danny Gray, and why Danny Gray is, one of my favorite prospects in this class, Tay Martin, he'll go up and get it. He's not afraid. Again, he's a good athlete, but he will also go after the football and he won't shy away from it. So with both of those wide receivers, and again, they've had tons of success in that regard as well. I mentioned Kendrick Bourne, but you look at Juwan Jennings, the way Juwan has came on as a 7th-round draft pick out of Tennessee. They find these types of guys that are fitting to what they're trying to do. And I think both of those guys, again, might be practice squad guys year one, based on the current depth, but I see a lot of talent, man. I just see talent across the board, just untapped potential, especially with those two wide receivers.
It's funny, when I was in the Canadian League, we used to play golf for money on our off days, and I used to go with some of the quarterbacks. And man, when you're playing golf and everybody's letting their hair down, and you start talking players, and they would always want to talk players with me because I was the personnel guy. And so we'd be talking players, and I can't tell you, Brad, how many times a different quarterback, when he's describing like the greatest thing that a quarterback can say about a wide receiver. And it's funny. It's a phrase that it's like etched in my brain forever. If a quarterback loves a wide receiver, he'll say, he'll go get it for you. He'll go get it for you. And that's the line that they use. Mm-hmm. He'll go get it for you. Because ultimately, people don't realize that in the NFL and even big time college football, I would say at least a third of the passes you're throwing out there are what we would call 50-50 balls.
Tight window throws.
Yeah, tight window throws, and you gotta put it out there for your receiver, and you gotta have a belief.
Trust your guy.
You gotta trust your guy, and you gotta throw him open a little bit, but you also he's gotta go get it for you. And the great quarterbacks, or the quarterbacks, when they're talking about the receivers they love, they'll say, "Oh man, this guy will go get it for you." And that's what I see with Mack and with Tay Martin. I don't know what the 40 is going to look like. I don't know. I don't even know how it's going to translate their speed to the NFL game. But to me, they're both fast enough, and they'll both go get it for you. And to me, I'm really eager to see if one or both those guys can make an impact. My guess is they can. Let's talk about Jordan Mason too. I think this is an interesting running back. Everybody talks about the running back, and obviously the Ty Davis Price was the high pick, and so he gets a lot of the headlines. But then you watch the film of Jordan Mason at Georgia Tech, and he's got some exciting traits, and he's 5'11", 223 pounds. He's intriguing as hell. And then down here in the chat, we've got another donation from Richie. He says, "Hey guys, have either of you scouted Camp Invite running back wide receiver Calvin Turner Jr. from Hawaii? Looks like he came out of the Debo mold as a player." And then Emiliano above him says, "Wasn't Hawaii's wide receiver Calvin Turner invited to Niner minicamp? He might be a good pickup also. He also plays running back." Both those guys are on the money. I watched Turner and Mason last night. Mason at 225 pounds has got tremendous scoot. I don't know what the 40 times said. And then Calvin Turner, I'm shocked Calvin Turner wasn't a priority free agent that teams bid on, because he was very productive. Yeah. I wouldn't say he's Debo because he's not nearly that powerful, but he's
running more back, of an electric type wide receiver.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I like him as a hybrid guy, running back, wide receiver, but I think he makes it in the NFL. I'm a huge Calvin Turner fan. Now, I watched Hawaii maybe too much because I'm a degenerate gambler to some degree. And I may have had them in a final leg of a parlay or two.
Maybe let you down a little bit.
Let's just say this, I knew their record like on the island and off the island. I mean, seriously, I bet against them against Wyoming. I think I covered on that. I mean, but Calvin Turner's a big play guy, and I loved watching him this year. I like both those backs, and I think both those. Now, maybe I'm falling in love with this undrafted class too much, and I don't even know if Turner's signed yet. But if they can get Turner, and if they can show up in camp with Jordan Mason, I'm intrigued by both those guys. By the way, if you can hear in the distance, my golden retriever is,
chasing a squirrel, probably.
Yeah, exactly. She's decided that somebody's breaking into the house on the other side of the house.
I have a dog, so I have that from time to time as well.
Try to ignore her if you can.
But
audience.
Speaking of dogs, 2 more dogs that you just named.
Okay,
Calvin Turner and Jordan Mason. My guy Justin, who is a regular on my channel, is head over heels about Jordan Mason. He's kind of pulling me along because he's dropping a lot of clips. I've had an opportunity to start to try to pull baseline traits off of what I think he is, and he seems like a guy that is going to come in and battle JaMycal Hasty for that potential third down running back role. It's been a position or like a slot that I've wanted to replace potentially or bring competition in for JaMycal Hasty, because it does feel like they have him in a pretty solidified kind of third down role, whether that's using him in pass protection and or getting him out in the backfield. And I look at Jordan Mason, and he's actually looks to be a little bit more physical version kind of JaMycal Hasty. He's bigger, and but he has very similar movement skills in the sense of he's still shifty, still able to get out in space, make people miss. There's my guy right here, leader of the Jordan Mason hive.
This is him, Justin E.
Yep, this is my guy.
He's donating. He says Jordan Mason actually led the nation in forced missed tackles per attempt at 0.44%. That's good info.
Yeah, Justin is loving him, and I call my guys, my little community, we call each other the sourdough squad, and so I also have my sourdough scouts, and Justin is the head of the sourdough scouts. Man,
awesome, man.
He's been hitting on a bunch of prospects this year, and he loves Jordan Mason, and he's swaying me. He's swaying me. Now I haven't done the full study yet. I obviously want to dive in. I want to basically watch how he is consistently throughout, but you can see the traits popping off, and you can see how he could be a guy and could be a factor in this offense, especially in that potential third down role.
So imagine this, guys. If you're listening to this discussion, Brad and I have gone for 48 minutes. We have talked Niner draft exclusively. We've only gotten into the undrafted guys.
We haven't even mentioned about the guys actually drafted.
We have not. We're doing a draft segment. We haven't talked about anybody who's actually been drafted yet, and we're almost 50 minutes into this thing. But that, to me, is the illustration of how great this class was and how you got to feel really good if you're a 49er fan. Because have they made some high-profile swings and misses? We can all quote it, chapter and verse. Reuben Foster, Solomon Thomas, Dante Pettis, Akella Witherspoon, Joe Williams, Jalen Hurd. I mean, we all know those names.
Yes, we do.
But the reality is, Raheem Mostert, undrafted free agent. Azeez Al-Shaair, undrafted free agent. Jeff Wilson, undrafted free agent.
Kendrick
Nick
Bourne
Mullen
is now making millions with the Patriots.
Patrick Bourne. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. They've done a really good job on DJ Jones just got broken off. Day 3 guy. George Kittle, maybe the best tight end in the game. Day 3 guy.
Yep.
The Niners have some really good scouts, and they've done an incredible job at the back end of the draft and with the undrafted guys. One more here before we get into the actual draft. Mason and TDP seem like a Mike Shanahan pick. Mike reliving his C.J. Anderson days with the Broncos. Well, I'll say this. I mean, there's no question that they're doing a really nice job. Matt Breida, undrafted. Jermichael Hasty, undrafted. Emmanuel Mosley, undrafted. Do you see the theme going on here? And this is one of my favorite comments. Jay Stamps, Niners undrafted class is bumping.
Yes.
Bumping. We'll
Fact.
take the G off. It's just bumping. All right. Let's get to the draft. Because the draft itself, now we'll start at the front. Let's start with Drake Jackson. To me, he is D Ford. He's got a great motor, and he's got an electric, you can't coach this kind of first step.
Yes.
To me, it's all about, and I'm not worried about I think he's weak against the run. Like if you put him in certain schemes, I think he's a liability against the run that almost has to come off the field, and I think teams will run at him. But he's a crazy athlete. The motor's legit. The first step cannot be coached. And in the wide nine, where it's all about, burn the edges, make that quarterback step up in the pocket, I think he's exactly what the doctor ordered. And if he can stay healthy and settle in at a good weight and they can get him in some reps, I would not be shocked if Drake Jackson was the starter opposite Nick Bosa week 1.
Drake Jackson is 100% a traits guy. Like I like to call myself a traits guy. I love trying to pull athletic profiles and like intangible profiles and that's how I scout. So I love the traits. And I think you're actually exactly right. I think when I look at Drake Jackson, one of the first thing that stands out to me on tape is the monster arms that he has. They are just long. The arm length, I'm not going to compare him to Alden because I've kind of been seeing that flying around. But when you look at the arms, I could see some Alden there, because when Alden was being the menace that he was for the 49ers, just absolutely demolishing defenses, he was just a menace to handle. And those long arms really helped him, stay off these tackles and be able to use all the moves. So what Drake Jackson, I think from a traits perspective, borderline elite with the height, the length, like you mentioned, the first step, get off, the quickness. You see the baseline ability to be able to work outside speed, counter inside moves. I think where he is still raw is just with the technique. I think when it comes to his pass rushing moves, he needs to work on his counter moves off his initial move.
Yeah.
Because if he works his initial move and gets stuck, he kind of just gets stuck. But he has the athletic traits to be able to add to the bag and be able to start setting guys up, I think, a little bit better, setting them up with outside speed, counter swim inside, and be able to start working that game a little bit further. But you're exactly right. One of the first plays against ASU, you could tell he diagnosed the play. He just basically crashed down and made a really nice tackle for loss. And you got to see the speed. You even got to see him kind of pause to open up to ensure he's holding outside contain. But then once he realized the running back was crashing downhill, he's like, all right, I'm going. So you see the traits. The traits absolutely pop off. But again, he just turned 21. You get this guy with Chris and you let him build him up. I think Drake Jackson could be a phenomenal player. And like you said, that D Ford role opposite of Nick Bosa, you get this speed element that has been missing. You go back to 2019, there are metrics that point to why that defense was so successful. And a lot of it pointed to D Ford being on the field and the ability to move quarterbacks off their spot with his speed, and other guys cleaned up, Bosa, DeForest, Eric. So in that regard, I love the pick. I thought he was going to be baseline first rounder. So the fact that he slid all the way to 61, I think is immense value for the 49ers. I think it was a home run pick. And I think what I love most about it is he's not a finished product. And with the defensive line coach that the 49ers do have, I'm pretty excited to see what that pairing looks like, especially putting him in the same room with Nick Bosa, who might be one of the best tacticians in the NFL when it comes to hand fighting, when it comes to setting up moves. Again, Bosa is a guy who not only has the physical traits, but he is a technician in every sense of the word. And to be able to pass that on to Drake Jackson, I think Drake Jackson could be a phenomenal player when it's all said and done.
Yeah, that is a great point because it is so true. Who the other guys are in the room who set the tone oftentimes, impact the guys coming into the league. And if you've got a guy who truly is a technician and whose as feet and hands are all tied together, as you've heard his college coach say, Nick Bosa, if any of that rubs off on Jackson, man, you really got something.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this Niner D line. To me, the number is always 10. Can you show up in camp with 10 NFL quality defensive linemen? If you have 10, man, you're pretty loaded. The Niners go Bosa. Let's just take a look at this on paper. Right now, let's just say Jackson's your starter. Bosa, Kinlaw, Armstead, Jackson. Those are your ones.
Yep.
Your twos right now on the D line are Ebukam, Ridgeway, who they brought in as a free agent, Kevin Givens, and Kamoko Toure from the Colts. Let's say those are your twos. Then your threes. Now you got Jordan Willis, Kerry Hyder, who re-signed, Kalia Davis we'll get to, and Charles Omenihu. Those are your threes. And your fours would be Alex Barrett, who's got a terrific pass rush ability in his own right. Mo Hurst, who's not a slub or
not at all.
No, I mean he can really move.
He was my defensive training camp player of the year last year. I picked the kind of surprises for that particular award, but I thought Mo Hurst was wrecking shop last year in training camp.
And then the Fresno State kid we didn't talk about, Kevin Atkins, who's very powerful and explosive. He's there. Chris Slayton, who's formerly at Syracuse, an interior guy. He's probably the weakest guy of the bunch. That's 4 different complete lines. That's like a hockey team that can rotate lines in and out. You guys play with your hair on fire, and then you put your hand up, and we'll send in the next group, and we'll just keep coming at you in waves. Yep. I think I was mentioning it to Matt Barrows late in the year when we had him on. The Niners had 10 guys that had double-digit snaps in one of those late season games on the D line. So they're truly playing a lot of bodies and they're rotating them in. To me, this is the deepest defensive line room I think I've ever seen on paper going into camp. How's it gonna fare? I don't know. But on paper, man, if you're just counting bodies, and they were stacked last year and they got thin as the season went on due to the injuries. You can, D linemen are almost like pitching in baseball. You can never have enough. But the Niners are going to challenge that theory, aren't they? Because, they're going to show up with almost 20 defensive linemen. And if you're one of these other teams that's thin at that front, man, I'm telling my scouts, you study the 49ers all August because they're going to set free some D linemen that can play and probably multiple D linemen that can play. And we got to snap those guys up. They're stacked on the line. Stacked.
Absolutely stacked. And as a trench guy, I'm so happy. I just couldn't be any happier because not only does that same logic apply to the D line, it now applies to the O line. I look at the offensive line and I'm like, oh, we got some boys to choose from. There's going to be some competition here. But back to the defensive line, I 100% agree. I might be biased as being a trench guy, but I believe everything starts up front. It ends and begins up front. So if you have good trench play, both on the defensive side and offensive side, it puts everyone else in a better position to do their job correctly. Again, if you get Juwan Kinlaw back there on the interior, and he might be still developing as a pass rusher, but one of the things that I do love is give me that nose tackle that takes 2 offensive linemen to block and allows that they can't go to second level because they got to worry about Juwan. And if you got to take 2 guys and they got to worry about 1 defensive tackle, well, guess who gets the free flow? Fred Warner. And if Fred Warner is going untouched, he's going to make a play more often than not. So I love it. I love in all 4 levels that you mentioned of that defensive line. I'm loving it. Again, we have Jordan Willis, who's been a standout. I mean, even though he had the 6-game suspension last year, I imagine if he doesn't get suspended, he would have been more in the rotation early on. Again, Mo Hurst, was injured almost the entirety of the year. I think he played in one game, but in the one game he played, you felt the impact that he had. So there's a bunch of guys on this team, especially the defensive line, that could this group is insanely deep, and I can't wait to get out to training camp and watch it all.
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about Kalia Davis for a second, because I think he's one of the really exciting players. We may not see him this year. He may wind up redshirting this year, but I think this was one of the best picks. This guy played Sam linebacker. He played the Mike. He played the Will. He was a linebacker. And if you watch the film, he wears 22. Right. How many D tackles wear 22? And he looks like another guy who's kind of sawed off. A lot of people comparing him to DJ Jones, and some people feel like he's really, really strong against the run. I don't think he's got quite the DJ anchor ability, but what I just see is he's got unbelievable motor and a ridiculous amount of quickness. And he's kind of, that old saying, a great D tackle is a rolling ball of butcher knives. And it's like, you know what? That's this guy. This guy is, he's liquid. Like you want to block him off his right shoulder, he'll twist back and find the opening. I mean, it's like he's really, really, he can make himself really narrow to get through tight spots. He's got this unbelievable motor. He plays with this infectious joy. You can see it. And he's coming off a knee injury, and how will he move coming off that injury? That's my question. But I see this guy, Brad, as it's, first and second down Kinlaw, third down Kinlaw comes off the field, and a Kalia Davis comes on the field, and he could man that spot. Maybe the replacement for a Kentavious Street, who gave them some interior pass rush and moved on in free agency. I'm really excited to see Kalia Davis, because I think he's going to be a really nice interior rusher. And God, those guys are so valuable now. It's like I almost wouldn't draft almost anybody who's just a run stuffer inside. I need that guy to have some pass rush in today's game with all the sub package stuff and all the guys in the shotgun on first down and that kind of thing. Give me your thumbnail on Kalia Davis. And this is a great line here on the chat from Randy. He says Kalia Davis is like trying to block a wet bar of soap. That's a good one right there.
That's a good one. I like that one. That'd be something like I'd hear one of my old coaches say.
Exactly.
So I like to pull a lot from my perspectives as a player. Again, I didn't play at a ultra high level or anything like that, but I feel like I learned a lot. And I got to play against some really good players. And the best defensive linemen that I played against were about 6'2", 300 pounds. I played against a bunch of 6'5", 320, 340s. Again, as a smaller offensive lineman, you get me a 6'5", 340 guy, I'm loving it, because he's not moving fast. I know my first step quickness is going to be able to, I'm just going to get into his pads and I'm going to move him. So I always had a much easier time with the bigger bodies, but when you get these 6'1", 6'2" kind of tweener guys, and exactly like that comment said, it's like trying to block a wet bar of soap. And when they're just as fast as you off the line of scrimmage, that's really difficult, especially too when they can get a jump on the snap and they're actually into your chest before you even get your first step off. That makes it very difficult. So Davis is that type of guy. He's going to be one of these guys that are extremely explosive off the line of scrimmage. Again, why he gets comped to DJ Jones, I call him squatty bodies. He's a shorter build, but they're explosive. And when you can get explosive on the nose, again, they're closer to the center. Center's got to do the snap action. And if you're being able to get your hands into their chest before a center can get his hands back out, you've effectively neutralized him, unless you're going up against obviously all pro or pro bowler who knows how to work the hands like that. But that's one of the reasons why I will never discount a nose tackle who's 6'1", 6'2", where a lot of people will see the size and like, oh, same thing that happened to Aaron Donald. I was like, a lot of people were like, oh, Aaron Donald's too small. It's like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the strength, he's got the explosion. And again, low man wins. He's already won that battle. If you can have the speed and you can have the stout basically being able to hold your ground on double teams or in one-on-one matchups. That's it. That's what you got to do. So now, and then not on top of that, those guys are quicker. They're more twitched up than the bigger bodies. So obviously offensive linemen are going to have a little bit more struggle with some of those guys at times because of their ability to explode and get into them more faster. So Davis fits that role for me, or fits that mold for me. And I agree. I think, he might end up on PUP to start the year, but did you look at the defensive line depth? They have so much depth that it's a luxury at this point to get him in the 6th round. I think it's a great pick.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like one of my favorite guys in this draft went to the Cowboys, John Ridgway from Arkansas, a big defensive tackle. But what I couldn't get beyond is that Ridgway had no pass rush ability. I mean, he's tough as hell, and
Right.
he's wide as he's like the guy's like a Coke machine. He's so wide,
Right.
and he's tough and he's mean and he's nasty, but he's not a pass rusher. And like he couldn't come off of his block, see the quarterback step up,
Gotta
and
get
then
off your
quickly
blocks.
close to him. He just couldn't do it. He just
Right.
can't do that. A guy like Kalia Davis, he can hold his ground, and then when the quarterback steps up in the pocket, he can throw his guy away
Yeah,
and
they
shoot
get
to
that
the quarterback.
separation. They peek over, they see where the ball is, and then they just get rid of them.
Right. And this guy's got an ability to really close. The other thing I think is interesting when you watch the NFL numbers, and I saw a breakdown about a week before the draft, 10 years ago and today, there's a huge difference in who's sacking the quarterback. The quarterback used to be sacked almost exclusively by defensive tackles and defensive ends. Now the sacks are coming less from defensive tackles, more from defensive ends, linebackers, and safeties and corners. And so you're seeing the distribution of the sacks coming from a wider group of people. Heck, look at that Seattle Niner game last year when Seattle's drafted a number of guys coming off the edge, Darrell Taylor, the other guy who's kind of the Collier and other guys, and they really weren't getting much edge rush, but where they were burning the Niners were on Bobby Wagner delayed blitzes through the A gaps, where
Yeah.
he'd drop, wait for the center to turn his head and shoot the gap.
Yep.
And we're seeing corner blitzes, we're seeing dogs, we're seeing safety blitzes, we're seeing so it's a situation where it's rushing the passer now is a group effort.
Mhm.
And if you can find guys, some guys have a knack, and maybe they're a linebacker that has a knack, maybe it's a safety, maybe it's a corner. You either get home or you don't. And some of these guys who get home consistently at the collegiate game, when they came to the NFL, well, they no longer were doing that. Now those guys are being asked to do that. And so we're seeing rush coming from any number of areas. Let's talk about the LSU running back, Ty Davis Price. A lot of people wanted the Niners to go safety with this pick,
Mhm.
and they went with the running back. And to me, this is probably tied to Deebo Samuel in some strange way. Give me your thoughts on TDP, as they're calling him, who lit up the Florida Gators last year. I mean, the Gators still have yet to touch this guy. What did you think of the pick?
I think 49er fans have a little bit of PTSD in regards to running backs, like quote unquote early. We mentioned Joe Williams earlier. Trey Sermon was traded up to go get I think at the 88th pick last year. There's a big question mark on him and what he's going to look like next year. But when you get over that, and again, because I think we can get so focused on the value part of it. Like, is this good value? Did we get good value? Did we reach for this pick? Could we have got him at 105? Could we have got him at 134? I think people get hung up on that. Once I kind of moved past, like, okay, they took him at 93, and this is the guy. I started watching, and I came away pretty darn impressed. As a former offensive lineman, if my running backs know how to set me up and can get these linebackers flowing to the left, my track is already moving to the left. They basically bring them over to me, and then they cut off the backside, and they basically pull. They're like magnets, right? The defense is going to react to these running backs. So if you treat them like a magnet and you know that, when you find a running back who has that ability and understands that type of movement, you can set up your offensive line and then cut off those blocks. That was one of the biggest takeaways that I saw from him. His ability to set up blocks, then burst through the hole, and then how he finishes runs is phenomenal. Him lowering his shoulder, he's going to run through your face. And you look at Elijah Mitchell, I think Elijah Mitchell really kind of fans would pigeonhole him into, mini Mostert. You heard that a lot just because of the 40 time and all that. But when you look at Elijah and you look at the way he runs, he's pretty physical back. I think he was almost like leading the league, at least from a rookie standpoint, in yards after contact. So he was going to be a physical running back. And I think they kind of wanted that with Trey Sermon, but with TDP, he's exactly that. He is extremely physical. But not only is he physical, I love the vision. I love his ability to set up his blocks and then cut off of it. He has a knack for finding the hole, and he has really good patience. And so when you look at the entire, who he is, I've gotten pretty excited about it. And I start looking at, because you look at Jeff Wilson has phenomenal vision. I think that's probably his best trait. But with TDP, you get the physicality, you get the burst, you get the vision all in one. And I'm pretty interested to see how that translates, because when you look at his production, he's running between the tackles. And, the 49ers have been, quote unquote, an outside zone team. Obviously, losing Mostert last year threw a huge wrench in their plans. Had to move Debo into the wide back role to get those explosives out of the outside zone. But I think now with a guy like TDP and Elijah Mitchell and Jeff Wilson and Trey Sermon, I think they're going to attack the middle a little bit more. I think they're going to be able to set up outside zone, but they also have the backs to attack right up the middle, hit the A and B gaps a little bit more than they have in years past. So I like what they're doing. I feel like I'm seeing the vision. Now we'll see if that actually transpires in training camp, but to me, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a more physical brand being added, and especially attacking, right up the middle a little bit more, especially with the TDP pick.
I just think you got to be more dynamic. In the NFL, you got to have a dynamic 220-pound back, and that's why that was the need for Debo as a running back. Is that Jeff Wilson is solid, but he's not really dynamic.
Right.
And I love Elijah Mitchell. I think he's phenomenal in short yardage. I love the way he kind of twists and turns for every yard. But he averaged 2 yards a carry between the tackles. And Sermon didn't get a lot of run last year, but he averaged a similar 2 yards a carry between the tackles. They need somebody who's dynamic, who can run between the tackles. And if he can get to that second level, could be gone. I mean, what I saw with TDP,
you have the offensive lineman to get to the second level, so
right. And if TDP can get to that second level, he's got the kind of a running ability where he can run through your secondary. So he could pop a few. I like him as a trap runner. And I agree with wholeheartedly with the patience. You see it. He's patient. I mean, usually backs that had to wait their turn, like he had to wait his turn at LSU. They're such in a mad rush to go that they don't demonstrate that patience. A guy that
outrun their blocks at times. Because
they're
wait a little bit, my guy.
They're trying to impress. But this guy is so well coached, and LSU does such a great job that he's got low mileage, which is great. It's like a car that has low mileage, and he's got patience to let his blocks set up for him, and he's got ability, if he can get on that second level, to outrun you or run you over. So I like that pick. I like that pick a lot. I'm really eager to see. I would not be shocked if Davis Price emerges as their far and away number one running back this year. What do you think of Danny Gray? Because I did a video before the draft saying, you know what, third year in a row, this is the deepest wide receiver class I've seen in years. And I went through all of the players, and I'm like, you know what, of all the guys in this draft at receiver, the guy that's the perfect fit for the Niners and would perfectly complement what they do is Danny Gray from SMU. And we put it out there before the draft. And then after the draft, of course, we kind of re-put it out there, and it got a lot more hits. But to me, he's a space creator with the toughness that I'm looking for. And the 4-3-3 doesn't tell the story because, heck, you saw it. There's a million guys who run 4-3-3. But then when you watch this guy, most guys who run, fast times, when you flip on the tape, you're disappointed because the tape doesn't match the player.
Right.
To me, Gray is faster on the field. He's Tyreek Hill kind of fast on the tape, where 4-3-3 normally would go, wow, 4-3-3. If anything, 4-3-3 is kind of doesn't really tell the story as far as I'm concerned. I think this guy is almost faster than that and plays faster. Give me your rundown on him.
Well, you made a great call by saying that he would be a good fit. And I would also go and say that I had very similar thoughts. I call them draft crushes. So I'm super into the draft. Well, fun story kind of about how we started this journey, or I started this journey with this particular brand. My whole thing was I wanted to figure out how to get into scouting somehow, but I knew that path isn't linear. And I went to school for multimedia communications and had, marketing background, social media marketing. So I've kind of blended all those worlds together. But the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today is because I wanted to scout. I wanted to evaluate talent. And so Danny was a draft crush of mine. He was a guy I actually went in to the tape scouting Marcus Jones and Reggie Robinson, his teammate.
Yeah, we're supposed to be the guy.
And so
Gray was the guy.
These are my favorite stories. When you go into the tape and you're just like, who is this guy? And so I'm trying to focus on Marcus Jones out of Houston. I'm trying to focus on Reggie Robinson. And I'm just like, who's 5? Like, I was like, all right, I'm abandoning Reggie Robertson. No disrespect.
Right.
I'm like, I'm off this guy. I'm like, who's 5? And so then I went down the rabbit hole on 5. I had to watch 3 games in a row because I was like, I need to know who this guy is. And this was before I knew he ran a 4-3-3. This was solely tape. Didn't even really know who he was at all. I knew the name. I didn't really know. There wasn't a bunch of hype about him or anything. And so when I just started watching, I was like, oh, the same things that you said. He is a wide receiver. When you hear that 4-3-3 speed, you think track speed, you think, like linear routes, and you're just like, does that translate to being a football guy? This guy is a football guy. He's tough, the contested catch. One of my favorite things is the way, again, we talked about it earlier, he attacks the football. If that football is in the air, he has that mentality. That is my ball, and I'm not going to come down without it. And that's one of my favorite attributes of his. But again, you talk about the yak ability. Once you get him the ball in space, the way he's able to create, the way he's able to use that 4-3 speed to get out of there. He's got the lateral quickness. He has everything. So I was ecstatic. Like I was doing a draft live show. I put my reaction out there. I'm like banging. I
saw that. That was the video I saw.
I was hyped, man. I was so excited about it because, again, it was a guy that I kind of hyped up pre-draft. And then to see the 49ers hit on it, and then to kind of hear them talk about him. And they mentioned the same kinds of things that why I like him. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'm okay at this scouting thing here a little bit, because it seems like we had the same kind of thought process on who Danny Gray was as a prospect. Not only, the speed's great. You can't teach that. We hear that all the time. You can't teach speed, but you also can't teach toughness. Like that's a trait that you have or you don't have. And I think with Danny, you see it. You see him attack the football. You see him just have this mentality about himself where he's just a playmaker. And so I'm really excited about the pick. I think it was one of the best picks in the draft.
I do too. Brash Cat says Danny Gray is a 6'5" wingspan. I mean, you can see it. He's got really, really long arms. Strength is still going to be his issue, but strength is not his game. His game, I mean, he's strong enough, but I think he's going to be an incredibly popular player on this team because he creates space. And you're
luckily he went to a play caller who knows how to scheme it open.
Exactly. And I can't wait for that. What did you think of Sammy Womack? Because that was another pick that got panned. And man, I knew nothing about Sammy Womack. I'm not going to try to pretend that I did.
Learning.
I did watch the Toledo film. I talked to my buddy who was on campus, and he said this kid is tough and this kid is fast. And I said, well, he ran 4.39. He's like, well, his functional speed is easily 4.39. And then, he went from a walk-on to an all-conference player, which that tells you, as somebody who played college football, Brad, that, you don't do that unless there's a lot of work that goes on between I walked on to
Everything is earned. Literally nothing is given.
Exactly. I mean, how many guys walk on, don't even ever start? And this guy walked on and became all conference, and he runs 4.33. And then I heard the interview, and he sounds exactly the way every great corner that I've ever met sounds, which is like so ridiculously cocky that you almost want to say, get out of here. Get the hell out. I can't even listen to you anymore. You're so ridiculously.
That's how cornerbacks got to be, right?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you show me a corner with ridiculous cockiness, and I'll show you the average corner. You better be cocky. Why? Because the receiver opposite you probably runs 4.4. He's one of the best players and best athletes of his class, and he knows where he's going, and you're in a back pedal, and you have no idea where he's going, and you have to mirror him up and down the field. So guess what? You better have some belief that, that your game is pretty tight. And, man, listening to Womack talk about his game, he's like, man, I'm a press corner, shutdown corner. And, he's just got a ton of confidence, a ton of cockiness. Reminded me a lot of the guy the corner the Niners drafted out of K-State a few years ago, wound up in Seattle.
Good old DJ Reed, huh?
DJ Reed. You remind me a lot of DJ Reed. DJ Reed told me he was a Pro Bowler on draft
I actually
night.
like that comp. That's a great comp.
Yeah, exactly. And he's cocky. So I love the Womack thing. I'm not worried about the 5'9". But give me your thoughts, because there's not a lot of film on him. There's not a lot of highlights on him.
Right.
He was not a celebrated player, but I kind of like that pick. And it sounds like the Road Scout was convicted, which I love, when a guy will bang the table for a guy that he believes in.
Absolutely. And I agree. The size thing isn't an issue to me. One of my favorite cornerback prospects in this class was Marcus Jones out of Houston. He's 5'9". And he played as an outside corner. He
might not even be 5'9", right? He might be more like 5'8".
5'8".
Yeah. Might be
so
shorter.
I always have this mentality. I don't pigeonhole people based on, measurables. Again, it's going to be something that goes into the process and evaluation. But it seems very simplistic, but you can either play football or you can't. And at a certain point, if a guy's 5'9" and he's able to match up with 6'3" wide receivers and give them fits nonstop, he can even come down on potentially tight ends and do those types of things, then I'm not going to be ultra concerned about the size. They can mitigate the size with their athletic traits. So with Womack, again, he kind of fits that mold of the Marcus Jones out of Houston that I really liked. Again, you see that nastiness, you see the confidence, and you have to have that, like you mentioned, when you play cornerback, because guess what? You're going to get beat. You're going to get got at one point, and you have to be able to wipe that and still have that same mentality. Like, okay, you got me that time, but you're never going to beat me again. And so what I like about it is there's a clear need at the nickel. K'Wan Williams obviously wasn't retained. Diamador Lenore was a 5th-round pick in that similar type role. Kind of a similar traits, I think. When we look at Diamador, he's really good in press man. He's really good at handsy nickel corner. And I think, with this Womack pick, and especially how, like you mentioned, I've heard the same things, that they were very confident about getting him, and with where they got him. K1 was a 7th-round pick. I don't really care about what slot he was drafted in. I just care about what they do on the field. And again, it feels like toughness is a word that we keep coming back to. The mentality in which these players that they're drafting just feels like they're dogs. They just want to get out there and play football, and that's really the only thing that matters. And with, granted, the limited clips that I've seen of Womack, you can pick up. Again, I've seen him match up against Dwayne Eskridge, who's a 2nd-round draft pick, for Seattle. So you get to see some of the traits there match up, and you can see it. He's feisty. He's going to go after it. He's not going to shy away from contact, and he's going to be physical, and he's going to try to make you feel his presence. And so, getting that in the 5th round, Can't go too wrong with that.
Man, I've had a lot of live streams about the draft since the draft. This one I think is the best. I think this is the most comprehensive. I really appreciate you stopping by. Let's finish with your area of expertise. I like the Niner offensive line draft picks, but I don't think they're ready to go this year. But that's all TBD, right? We're going to find out in camp. But give me your thoughts on Spencer Burford. UTSA had a real strong run game with Sincere McCormick. They had a strong offense, and so did Fordham, for that matter. Both these teams are strong offensive teams. Burford has played guard and tackle, right and left side.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 43-game starter, long arms. The highlights showed him burying people and throwing guys down. He looks really, really intriguing. Zakel sounds like, more of the same. Maybe he could play a little. It doesn't sound like he's a tackle. It sounds like he's more of a guard or a center. But another guy just sounds tough and smart. He's an academic All-American, I believe, at least All-Conference. Both those guys are intriguing to me, but I don't think they're like if you need a starter out of this draft, I don't think they got that. But if you're looking for quality depth, I think they got exactly that. Give me your breakdown of the two O-linemen they actually drafted.
I think we're more aligned on those two particular prospects because I will give you a little bit of some truth serum here. I started to watch Burford pre-draft, and I turned off the tape on him. And the reason why I did that is because I was scouting him as a tackle. And when I looked at him as a tackle, I saw a little bit of sloppy footwork. Again, I am very specific about the type of offensive lineman that I like, and it's always going to start with being technically polished. I want my guys to have baseline technical attributes that you can even build on even further. Now, with Burford, one of the things that I saw right away is he has first step quickness, he has explosion, and he can be extremely physical. But when I saw him in pass protection and dropping into his pass set, his feet are a little clunky. You don't see that fluidity that I personally look for. And sometimes that can be tricky to teach because I can speak from experience. It took me an entire calendar year to learn how to properly pass set. Just the kick step. It's the timing of it to be able to have the balance while you're moving backwards, but have to be able to shoot forward for counter inside moves. It's hard. It's a really hard technique to learn, especially when you're huge. So with Burford, I didn't like him as an offensive tackle, and so when they drafted him, I was like, he's got to be a guard. I would imagine that they're going to try to kick him inside. At least that's how I see him. I see his best fit being at guard. And they've came out and pretty much said that. So that, again, makes me feel a little bit better about my evaluation. Again, I've went back and I've watched. Same things apply. You see the nastiness. You see the explosion. He's a good athlete for his size. It's just you see some – he'll be able to slide off blocks here or there, just because his base isn't totally set. Sometimes his pads get in front of him and he can kind of fall off a block. He can get swam at times. But I do think, like you mentioned, he is a guy that could be great depth. Potentially, it'll be interesting to see what he looks like when you kick him inside. And he's not on an island as much. And then he can work in unison and get to second level. Then I think that's where he'll be more successful. So I do think he's a developmental pick. I was wanting Zach Tom out of Wake Forest in that particular pick because I feel like there are similar prospects in regards to being tackle guard combos. I think both of them you can kick inside. But I looked at Zach Tom out of Wake Forest as being technically polished, which is, kind of why I was leaning more towards him. So, but they went with Burford, and I see the vision. Again, they talked about kicking him inside the guard. That made me feel better about the pick. I could see him as a functional guard in the NFL. So I felt better about that pick. It was something where I was like, I didn't love it. I had to go ask a couple people that I know, Brandon Thorne, who I respect greatly in regards to offensive line evaluation. He's been doing this. That's all he does is offensive line evaluation. I had to ask him. He's like, oh, he's a my guy. He needs a little bit of work, but he's a my guy. And I was like, okay. Just trying to make myself feel better about it. So But I do agree. I see him as a guard and I see him as a developmental prospect. Does that mean he starts this year? We'll see. But he does have great traits. At the bottom line is he's a traits guy. He's all the traits. Now let's see how they can develop him, put the technique on him, and see how he develops in that regard. But the other guy, Zakel, that they took in the 6th round, I love him. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like
The way you said that is awesome.
I wasn't sure because again, they take a guy out of Fordham. I had no idea who he was. Like I had no clue. And where are you gonna find Fordham tape on YouTube? It's good luck. So
Right.
you find and you piece together these clips, and I'm doing my evaluation live on stream. So I've got, a couple hundred people watching, and I'm watching the tape, and I'm like, who did we just draft? Because I have to give analysis on it. Like, is this a good pick? Is it not a good pick? And I came away loving it because I see him as a guard center combo. Is one of the first things that I saw. Not only do I see him as a guard, but he has the movement skills to be a center. I see the footwork. I see the foot quickness. I see the hips. I see the leverage. Even though he's 6'6", 315 pounds, he doesn't move like he's 6'6", 315 pounds. I'm also, I don't know if you know this about me, I'm a big Dan Brunskill fan. Not necessarily for how he pass protects in 1v1 situations, but I love how Brunskill moves when it comes to getting to second level, when they use him as a puller, when they have to reach an outside 3-tech. Again, he's reaching Aaron Donald in an outside shaded 3-tech. That's like, to me, as an offensive lineman, that's got to be one of the hardest plays in football, to get an Aaron Donald outside shaded and you got to reach him. Like, I was like, that's a hard task. And so we've seen Brunskill be able to do that time and time again. When I look at Zakel, I'm like, this dude looks like a Brunskill clone. And so when I look at Brunskill, I see the movement abilities. Yeah, he can be a little light in pass protection and one-on-one situations, but Brunskill doesn't lose on stunts. When it comes to passing off defenders, Brunskill doesn't lose there. So he does have one deficiency, which is, the one-on-one pass protection against stout defensive tackles. But other than that, I love Brunskill's game. And so when I looked at Zakel and I did a little bit more research into it and started to watch him and look at the traits and look at what he has, I'm like, oh, I like this, because I think this is going to be Brunskill's last year. And I don't think it's a surprise that they kind of drafted a guy that has a pretty similar archetype as Brunskill, because I think inside the building they do like Brunskill. But I think Zakel could be and develop into kind of maybe a better version of Daniel Brunskill. So I do see a potential where he can play center. And again, at 6'6", 315 pounds, and you have the movement ability, he can play low, get the leverage, he can reach, he can get to second level. And he had the neck roll. I had a neck roll too. So that was instantly full letter grade. Just bump up there for having the neck roll. So I actually came away really liking that pick.
It's funny. One of my buddies who actually scouts in that part of the country, and he's like, hey, he's like, I've actually met this guy, and this guy is tough. And to me, toughness is a big part of offensive line play. Give me 5. If not everybody's going to be technically sound. Not everybody's going to have the footwork of a first round pick.
Right.
But what you need 5 tough, dedicated guys who are working together. And if you give me 5 tough guys, I'll take 5 tough guys over 5 guys with great feet every day of the week. And my guy who rolled in there and met him said, this guy is a tone-setting tough guy. He said, and that to me is, I think the offensive line sets the tone in a football game. And so when I hear tone-setting tough guy from personnel people I trust, that makes me like the pick. And I think there's some coaching that has to go on there for sure. And I don't think he's a plug-and-play guy by any stretch, but I think he's a nice
round pick for a reason, probably. Yeah, but
exactly.
The intangibles are really nice.
And you know what? Those old linemen, the defensive line group, that you're going to face in the NFL, those guys are big, strong, fast, and tough. So you better have some toughness to you as well. I got one last one on the quarterbacks, but let me pay the bills here first. We got two sponsors. Dan Coach Emilio is our retirement planning specialist, buddy, and he's a sponsor of the Krueg Show. And give him a call today, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com. He's got 25 years of experience in the business. He's born and raised a Niner fan, Bay Area sports fan, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call. He's at 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. And we thank Danny for being a proud sponsor of the Krueg Show. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics.co. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, or a physical therapist, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. So what is it? Well, Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, be sure you go to telmetrics.co, Telmetrix.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being a proud sponsor of the Krueg Show. We appreciate them greatly, as we do with all of our sponsors. And also thank you to Casera's Italian men's suits. You can buy the merch now. The Krueg Show t-shirts are there. Their location is in Dublin, California, and they've got the shirts there. So if you want a Krueg Show t-shirt, I wish I had one in here. I'd hold it up. Got them in the house, but they're really cool. And it's just like the logo. It's a black shirt with a red logo. Very cool. Go to Casera's in Dublin and maybe get yourself a suit, but maybe pick out a t-shirt of the Krueg Show and support the channel. Loving doing this, by the way. Thanks to everybody who has supported the channel. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be alerted next time we do a live stream. Thanks to Len and Ryan and the guys behind the scenes here at the Krueg Show. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to Brad for being our guest today. And thanks to all of you for joining us in the chat. And we're going to be back with you later today talking NBA playoffs. And then tonight, after Giants Cardinals, we'll do a little post game. We had a great post game last night. We talked for 2 hours and talked a lot of baseball. So football, is my love, my passion. I'm a former scout, so that's my focus, and this is what I do for fun. But man, the baseball, I'm a Giants fan. The Warriors in the playoffs, I'm a Warrior fan. We're chopping it up and doing a lot of stuff. All right, last one for you, Brad, and awesome guest, man. I seriously, I really want you back because you're terrific.
It's been great, man.
And I'd love to be on your show because your show is blowing up, and it's really impressive. Let's talk quarterbacks. It's funny. Most people who do 49er stuff, it's all about the quarterbacks. But, to me,
we banned the quarterback on our channel for the last couple days.
Yeah, and the quarterback talk is overdone. But let's finish with the quarterbacks. We'll give the people what they want. Sure. Give me your thought on what you saw last year from Trey Lance and what you think the 49ers are going to do and how they're going to play their hand, both at quarterback, the addition of Brock Purdy. They have Nate Sudfeld. It's a very cheap quarterback room. It's friendly on the cap. I would imagine they're going to trade Jimmy. Give me your thoughts on the quarterbacks, Trey, Purdy, Jimmy, where he's going, just any direction you want to take the quarterbacks.
Definitely. When I look at Trey Lance, again, he has all the measurables in the world. He is, I feel like, just this prospect that you can mold into what you want him to be. I know that they are attacking his throwing mechanics. It's something that they've been working on since last year. But obviously it's of course, a polarizing topic to be talking about the quarterback position. And even as of yesterday, with some of the reports coming out, rumors, whatever you want to call them, it's just an interesting situation. But again, this is a 21-year-old kid. You have to give him the opportunity. At a certain point, you have to give him the keys to the car, and he's got to be able to get out there and drive around and figure out how everything works. And so with Trey Lance, when I look at him from an intangibles and measurables standpoint, he's got everything that you want in a top-tier quarterback. I just think the only thing right now he's lacking is experience. And what's the best way to gain experience? Well, you got to go out and do it. So that's just the biggest thing. I think they have to move forward with Trey Lance as the starting quarterback. You dumped all that capital into getting him, and now you got to see what you got. Even if you perceive him to potentially need more time to develop, you have to develop him on the field. In my opinion, I think it's at that point where he does need to get out there, and he does need to see live bullets, and we need to see how he can handle that and then also get better from that. Obviously, the Jimmy Garoppolo situation has been exactly that, a situation. The surgery clearly threw a huge wrench in the 49ers plans. So it's going to be interesting to see if they actually can find a potential suitor, whether that's the Panthers or, again, are they waiting for a camp injury? So I hope he gets moved. I would be reluctant to keep Jimmy Garoppolo as a $27 million backup against with Trey Lance on the roster when it's crystal clear that the locker room looks at Jimmy as the starter. So to me, that just feels weird, especially for a young kid trying to get his footing. You know how it is. Like, you can doubt yourself, you can question your ability, and especially if the whole locker room is leaning for another guy that's there, but you're told, hey, you're the guy, that could be a problem. So the hope is that, although Jimmy has been a winner for the 49ers when he's been available, I do think they have made the commitment to go get Trey with that compensation. You gotta give him the opportunity. You got to see what he is, and you have to build an offense around him. So that's kind of the way I see it. If you can get compensation for Jimmy, great. That's the ultimate goal. But if they head into training camp and you see both those quarterbacks trot out onto the field, it just feels like it's going to be a recipe for disaster in a sense. So we'll see how that goes. But not that it can't be successful. It just feels like, with all the drama that's been stirred up around, not only the fan base, how the fan base is, but,
Sure.
I'm sure you've heard quietly behind, closed doors about how it's been perceived internally. So I just imagine it would be better to have a just clean break from that situation. But in regards to Sudfeld, I like Sudfeld. I got to watch Sudfeld last year in training camp. And got to watch him beat out Josh Rosen. And then I thought that was exactly right. I thought he was a better quarterback than Josh Rosen. So I feel pretty confident going into the year with Trey Lance as the starter, Nate Sudfeld as a backup, and Brock Purdy as your practice squad guy. I actually was scouting the tight end out of Iowa State, Chase Allen, because I thought it could be a late round potential undrafted free agent flyer at tight end for the 49ers. And I came away like, Brock Purdy's not too bad. Yeah,
a little bit more arm strength than you would think. Man,
yeah, and he has a little bit more
mobility
than you would think too.
Yeah.
And he had good pocket awareness and good presence. And again, he got that ball out of his hands and he was accurate at times. Now, he made your boneheaded play here or there, and who doesn't? But I actually came away like, that looks like a guy who could absolutely play in Kyle's scheme. Again, something that's predicated on play action and, scheming things open. I saw a guy who could be accurate and get the ball there on time, whether it's anticipatory throws, layered throws. I was like, that's nice. I was starting towards the end. I was mocking Brock Purdy at that Mr. Irrelevant pick. So I like the pick. Again, the 49ers are going to need 4 quarterbacks going into training camp. I hope it doesn't include Jimmy Garoppolo, just for the reasons that I mentioned before. But it's gonna be interesting. The saga is not over regarding the quarterback situation, though. That's for sure.
Hey, man, awesome stuff. Really enjoyed doing this, and tell people, once again, what you got going and when you're doing your next thing.
Yeah, you guys can follow me here, pretty much the SF Niners, on pretty much any platform, social media platform. We're probably there. Probably going to come back here not too long with a little bit of a film breakdown. I want to go through my notes from USC versus Arizona State, so we can look at Donovan West, look at Drake Jackson, and break down the things that we liked, things that we didn't like. And so that will probably be coming up in a little bit. But also, just thank you, Larry, for bringing me on, man. It's been a pleasure. You're a legend in the Bay Area, so it's been an awesome time chatting with you, man.
Dude, come back, dude. We'd love to have you back.
I got to get you on my channel now,
dude. I'd love to be. I'll come on your channel. You say it day or night, I'm there. But we'd love to have you back and maybe on the regular and do a regular thing. I think the people dug it. The chat was great. Your knowledge is great. Your credibility is off the charts. Awesome. And I'm always looking for people who are really credible in this area, because there's so many people, that are in this area. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are, and they're all great. I mean, I'm not judging anybody, but there's a lot of fans and not a lot of people with real pro credentials. And we went an hour and 45 minutes with you because you do have the credentials. And I just wanted to bring that to light. But thanks, man. Awesome live stream. And we'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah. We ain't never fall back.